Laura, thank you. Laura, thank you very much, and welcome everybody. My name is Jeff Gedman. I have the privilege of moderating this panel. And if I may ask, if someone out there had a headset for simultaneous interpretation that I could borrow, that would be enormously kind and helpful. So, what a time and what a topic. Musk, oligarchy, technology, and Europe. I was reading on the plane. I'm just in from Washington, that island of stability and serenity and certainty on these things. And I was reading on the plane about the topic, an article about the new predatory complex, about the unholy alliance between private wealth and government, and about the seizure of media by great and powerful wealth. It was an article from 1965. So the first thing I want to say is what we're talking about is not entirely new. You know, Mark Twain said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. It does rhyme. And now we do have a unique cadence. I would just say at the top that today's cadence has to do with this extraordinary confluence of different factors. One being the rise of tech billionaires as explorers and innovators on the frontiers of knowledge and space. The other is the rise of MAGA as a citizens movement, voters who are frustrated with elites and with government. The other is MAGA as a political movement and new elites, both manipulating and instrumentalizing popular discontent, and also, I would say, driving a political agenda and vision. And so I hope we'll hear from our panelists whether taking man, woman, humankind to Mars is a scientific project or whether it's a political project. We have fabulous speakers to address this and many other issues. We have Matthias Risse, who's with us on screen, who's a deep subject matter expert, a German academic who runs a center at Harvard, writes prolifically and teaches about these matters. We have also on screen Joel Kotkin, who has undertaken a range of research and public affairs writing over years, but has become of late keenly interested in the issue of high-tech oligarchy, trade elites, and the declining middle class in the United States. And then sitting next to me, of course, the renowned Pascal Bruckner, France's, I would say, Europe's leading political philosopher, intellectual, essayist, and book author. Now, having said all that, we have 55 minutes. We tackle it all. We have 55 minutes. You'll hear from the panelists. We will have time for questions, and then we will get you on to the next panel and then dinner. So, gentlemen, I'm looking at the screen, and I'm looking at this gentleman in person. Does someone want to volunteer to go first, or may I just pick? So I saw a wonderful expression on screen by you, Matthias, because your eyebrows went up, which suggested readiness and leaning in, and I'm going to call on you first. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, it's good to hear that you can read something of my face on the screen, because from my end, I mean, this is a very asymmetrical relationship. I really can't see anything that is in France. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm speaking to California, since that's where Joel is. So we are on the same screen here. So bear with me if I seem a bit disconnected from what's happening in Normandy, because I really can't see anything that is in Normandy. But that said, so let me jump right in. So I would like to share 4 observations of kind of different sorts about where we are with technological developments. And then I'd like to bring in a philosopher, since my role here is also, I'm one of the philosophers on the panel, is also to add a philosophical perspective. I will do that later, and I will since I am talking to France, I will bring in a French thinker, Jacques Ellul. But let me first offer my various observations about where things stand with the technology. So yes, first observation. I follow the development of these chatbots very keenly and closely, and they have become truly amazing, really revolutionary. And what I'm about to say is a very strange thing to say, but I've actually come to the conclusion that as far as philosophical work is concerned, the better versions of the chatbots are basically at a co-author status. So the level at which they understand philosophical reasoning is breathtaking. It is scary. So I think that's the future of even philosophical work, just kind of continuing to write books the way we have, I think is no longer a sensible possibility. That is where these things are right now. Second observation is on the impact of what's been happening in artificial intelligence, the impact of that on our common thinking about democracy. Many of you who are familiar with the theoretical debates about democracy will be familiar with Friedrich August von Hayek's argument for really both democracy as a governance system and the free market as an economic system. And the point of the argument is that it's not possible to centralize knowledge in the system to have either authoritarian governments or a social planner, so kind of dispersal of everything is a good idea. That is also increasingly no longer the case. So the capacities that we have, and this is of course what we see in China, what the Chinese government does with artificial intelligence, means this particular argument for democracy, obviously there's plenty of others, but this one is increasingly in trouble. And that also tells us something about the threat to democracy through effective administrative use of artificial intelligence devices, again, as demonstrated by China. Third point, this is more a transatlantic point about the realities of power. This is, Jeff, you already spoke about that. So we have this alliance now. I'm not sure how stable this is, but we have currently an alliance between the major tech billionaires in the United States and the Trump government. And this is very much, this is not just them hanging out at the inauguration. This is very real in certain provisions in the so-called Big Beautiful Bill. Issues around possibilities of regulation of American companies in the European Union and in the OECD context. You will have seen this in the news today. A lot is happening there. And there's also one other part of this bill is a moratorium on state regulation in the United States on AI development, which basically leaves all of that at the discretion of the federal government, which means this alliance here that we are seeing is incredibly powerful. So this is something one really, really needs to be very concerned about. And the fourth last observation about where things are is about the sheer pace of change that we are seeing. And again, this is also very much in the news right now. So the enormous investments that companies like Meta are making. So the race really is kind of accelerating. So we are coming into a new stage in the AI domain. So these are observations about where things are. So philosophical perspective. So I'm a philosopher of technology. I've been teaching classes in the philosophy of technology. And one thing to understand about the philosophy of technology, this is a field that it's not an old field. In the 20th century was shaped very much by some major, deeply pessimistic thinkers about the overall relationship between humans and technology. And the best known ones are Martin Heidegger, Louis Mumford, and Jacques Ellul. And since I am speaking to France, I will just say just a couple of things about Ellul. Ellul would have a field day with all of what's currently happening. So Jacques Ellul is famous for a book in English, The Technological Society in French, that is La Technique, l'enjeu du siècle, came out originally in 1964. And Ellul argues there that technology unfolds along internal dynamics that do not create space for human agency or creativity. And it's really ranging from society's economic and political setup to the very ways in which people lead their lives and even develop a sense of individuality. It's technology that shapes society according to its own logic. Ellul is famous for the thesis of the autonomy of technique, as he would say, the autonomy of technology, so that there is this own internal logic that drives everything in technological development, and that even though we may have the occasional sense of command and control in bits and pieces here and there, it's really the logic of technology that drives us forward, and it's really beyond particular individual control. So most philosophers of technology do not believe that. I do not believe it in its extreme form. In fact, it's been refuted in specifics many times, but these macro pessimistic thinkers are very useful to just kind of lift their finger and say, watch what's happening, watch what you are doing, watch what's happening to you. And Deleuze would very much have a field day these days and say, you better watch what's happening in the world because it might just overwhelm you very quickly. Thank you.
Matthias, thank you. That was succinct and incredibly rich, if not a little bit overwhelming. And I think where you left off suggests to me that we should hear from you next, Pascal, because these are public policy questions, technology questions, science questions, public policy questions, but also for ordinary citizens and voters, questions about what kind of world we want to live in with whatever agency we do indeed have. So with that, Pascal, you have the floor.
Thank you. Si vous permettez, je vais parler en français.
If you allow me, I speak in French. First of all, I want to say two simple things to not take up too much time. So, regarding sciences and technology, Europe opposes to America like prudence to audacious thinking. Since half a century, all innovations come from the other side of the Atlantic. And the second idea is that tech conquistadors are taken aback by their hunger for power. So I want to start with a sentence from John Locke. The spirit of all men when they're born is a tabula rasa, a blank page in America where historic facts will be written. United States have been created on a very simple idea, which is the idea of exploration. It divides to always cross borders, transgress limits with the unknown and the well-known. Since 1989, Europe has been born on the principle of precaution. We need to measure and evaluate hypothetical risks that are not confirmed but possible. GMOs, cell phone emissions, nanotechnologies. For Europeans, all innovations has a tragic characteristic that can hide something bad that we did not want nor foreseen. And as professors said, our instruments of domination on nature have become technical instruments on us. It's no longer a mean but an end, a destiny, as Heidegger said. So the old and the new world have two conceptions of the Enlightenment. So skepticism, optimism, and religion for Americans. So Europe combines an idealism of international relationships. It prefers negotiating to confronting with a pessimism to change. America, on the other hand, cultivates a tragic vision of the world with the certainty of a possible evolution and the appetite for the conquest of the future. So the first will always stay in the immobilism and the other part in the adventurism, so to speak. So with too much history, too many massacres, Europe is looking back in the mirrors. It's paralyzed by doubts and fears. No invention of the last few years was born in Europe, nor stayed in Europe. I will take the ARN messenger. When Stéphane Bancel, the DG of Moderna, a French man, found with his team a vaccine against COVID, thanks to the ARN messenger. It was a revolutionary method. He was blocked by the administrative burden of France. He went to America. He got millions of dollars for research. What does European Commission do against AI? It starts by regulating it with the 1st of August law, even though the race of AI is already won by China and America. So America invents, China copies, and Europe regulates or stays here without having the massive investments that it requires. And this was well developed by the Draghi report. So France, we must recognize that we have this quality, has decided to take on the challenge with insufficient capitals, 109 million euros with Mistral or COSIDE. So Europe, that for a long time after 1989 was in the post-national, does not believe in the future anymore, hates progress, and does only find reason to believe in doubt. And as our first speaker said, Europe is anti-modern. Do we have anti-modern thinker in France or in Europe today that is refusing the anesthetics and will only take a Doliprane to calm the pain? How these medical progress could happen without the global progress? So United States remind us since they were born that the best ones at democracy are those who embark humanity for a new adventure beyond the known borders. As for sciences, the military, Europe only knows the braking pedal, never the accelerator. And now I'm turning back to a French and European. Democracy is the governing body of ordinary minds, directed by extraordinary minds. But ordinary minds remind people that there are only citizens amongst others, even though they are tempted to create a new feudal era. The anti-inventors of the internet are no longer the neo-hippies working on their computers in their garage. They are conquistadors now who want to impose their ideas. They have two passions, the exploring mind, but also the will for power. Geniuses, explorers that have exploded in California also want to become master of thinking. This is why the brand of Elon Musk, Tesla, is now in an advanced stage of coma because of the Nazi salutes and soutaining extreme rights. He has unsettled his most loyal supports. With Starlink and SpaceX, Starlink has helped Ukraine a lot, made him believe that he had a specific talent to dominate societies without going through elections. If we think of Jeff Bezos as well, the Venetian population was exacerbated by his marriage. So these tech bros are people who think they're over males, over men, and they expose their fecundity. The 13 children of Elon Musk, with the last one called Robust, because people from the tech world are fascinated by the Roman era. They prefer empire rather than the republic. But I'm also thinking of another genius of internet, Pavel Durov, who has two types of children. So 6 official children, so He's French, but also has other nationalities. But he's also got hundreds of other children, because he distributed his semens to other women, to those who wanted. Only gods can fecund women as much as they want. And this says a lot about their mentality and what they think. They think there are Neron or Caesar, a little bit like Donald Trump, that they are flattering. Saint Simon would be delighted at the White House today. It would be a great observation field. So he combines the radical individualism with the extended man and the rejection of the institutions liberal that seem obsolete to them, except Sam Altman and Bill Gates. So the technical power gives to the spontaneous narcissism a providential encouragement. If we made it, and we did make it, is because we are the best, because we are superior to all others. And I want to quote Montaigne: as high as a man got, he's always sitting on his ass. So, but they have forgotten one detail, is that each inventor disappears with its invention. We don't bow to Jeff Bezos when we use Amazon, or Elon Musk when we use Starlink, or Peter T with PayPal. The great advances of technology become usual objects entering our routine. And I will end on this note: the popularity of policy, and I talk about now the administration, the Trump administration, is with portfolios and the attacks that they have been doing on public research and on university, on immigration, do compromise the perspective of growth in the long run. Inflation will go up to 6 to 7%. Growth has gone to 4% in the last quarter, to 1.8%, even though Trump can loosen his dogma. But with science and research, and his attacks to it are not reversible. His promises, the transhumanism promises, and the MAGA galaxy shows that we sometimes have to keep in mind the price of an egg and of a bottle of milk.
Pascal, thank you very much. For certain, in the Q&A, we'll return to a number of those points, many of those points. Thank you. Joel, now you have the floor. Over to you. Thanks for waiting patiently.
No problem. First of all, I'm sorry. I'm glad to be here, but I'm sorry that I'm not there, except that somebody has to suffer the perfect Southern California weather, so I'm going to take that burden. But basically, I'm going to, you've heard from a very high level. I'm going to give you a little bit more of what a reporter grunt of the last 50 years might have seen, having covered Silicon Valley. So I've gotten to see a lot of the history and just to understand how oligarchy formed and how it changes. It's become a big issue on the left, and some of it I think is genuine. What we're seeing, for instance, with Mamdani's apparent elevation to mayor of New York, the possibility of Cortez conceivably being the Democratic nominee. We clearly have a reaction against oligarchy that is being driven for the left. But what's kind of interesting to me is that in the past, most of the time that I've covered Silicon Valley and the tech community here in California, it's actually been the tech people have been actually the ones who finance much of the left through nonprofits. A lot of it comes from, for instance, you have the widow of Steve Jobs, who finances the Atlantic, and then once Elon Musk decides that he's going to join MAGA, all of a sudden they're all concerned about oligarchy, which they weren't concerned about so much before. Nor were they concerned when the Google people visited the Obama White House 427 times while Obama was president. So, I mean, it's clear that until fairly recently, most of the oligarchy was actually more aligned with the Democrats than with the Republicans. So that's really something that I think people don't really follow the history. But even if you take a look at the campaign contributions, Harris got the largest campaign contribution in history and managed to lose, and she was conveniently backed almost by most of the oligarchs. Now, there was some change in part because of the amazing ineptitude of the Biden administration, but nevertheless, the oligarchs have been in recent years more on the left than the right. But I don't think this is really what the argument should be about. It's like Lord Palmerston said, the oligarchs have no permanent politics, just interests. So the things that, for instance, that Mateus is talking about in the legislation, probably a lot of that would, in the past, would have been supported by many Democrats. But the key thing is how much power can be concentrated in a few hands. To me, that's the big issue. To give you an idea, by 2020, the 5 largest tech companies were worth more than half of all those of state governments combined. And some of them had larger revenues than the countries of Italy, Brazil, Canada, Russia, and South Korea. They are essentially imperial powers of their own, and they will change if they need to. I'm sure most of them detest Donald Trump, but they'll go along with him as long as he's useful for them. The basis of this is monopoly power very much. Google and Apple, about 90% of all the mobile browsers. Android is basically doing about the same on search. Their 3 tech companies are responsible for about 2/3 of all online advertising, which is where the advertising money is. And 6 of the 8 largest companies in the world are from this group of oligarchs. So, obviously they got tremendous power. Now, some of that can be seen as being innovative, but my sense of it is that these companies are becoming more like the Zaibatsu in Japan or the cartels in Germany. And their innovation is, you see it in some areas, but not in many others. And you don't have the same kind of dynamism that I experienced in Silicon Valley, particularly in the 70s and 80s. It's become much, much more sort of a big power game. And as these companies get bigger and bigger, they have to somehow generate more revenue, which means they have to go into every conceivable aspect of life. So you have Apple TV, you have Prime Video, which is Amazon, you have a tremendous amount of power in the publishing industry, most of it going more to the left than to the right. But in both cases, I mean, there's certainly, there's nothing really good about having Jeff Bezos run the Washington Post, where I used to work. But, I think that this is where we're going, where this small group of people have phenomenal amounts of money and can really begin to dominate the political process. So I just want to just leave you with the idea that when we look at the oligarchs, and we may, the people on the right used to think it was part of a left-wing conspiracy. The people on the left would think it's part of a right-wing conspiracy. The reality is it's about a group of people who have gotten into the position. Often they're not the founders of the companies. They have a dominance over the culture, over communications, over politics, whichever party is in power. And that's really where the problem is. The problem is, how do we find a way to curb some of this power, and in the same time, how I think have an explosion of the entrepreneurial talent, which originally made Silicon Valley so unique.
Joel, thank you. Fabulous. We're going to move to Q&A now. Congratulations. 3 terrific panelists, 3 terrific speakers.
Thank you.
Pavel, you have a question? Introduce yourself, Pavel. Ask your question. Is there a microphone?
Thank you so much. This is a very inspiring panel, and my name is Pavel Fischer. I'm senator of Prague. And to become senator, you have to run. You have to run the campaign. And the challenge of today is that you have to run the campaign online. So this power in terms of political influence and political agenda setting is already here. I would like you just to develop briefly, how would you describe this extremely powerful tools which we have online for campaigning, which escape the local law enforcement, national-based framework, and which is so important for the rule of law and for transparency of political campaigning. So this extreme power that you speak about in terms of business and communication might break the fragility of trust that citizens have towards their elected representatives. Thank you.
Pavel, thank you. Do I have a volunteer who would like to tackle that?
Well, I could start a little
please,
bit.
Go ahead. Go.
Yeah, basically, of course, the best example of this in the U.S. was not under Trump, but under Biden, with the how they dealt with the COVID situation, and then with the Hunter Biden laptop. That was kind of outrageous. And frankly, I run a website. I had one time where something was pulled, and it was because the guy we interviewed, who happened to be a professor at the University of California at Irvine, didn't agree with some of the federal policies. I mean, we could see how that could be used, and I can see how it could be used in both ways. But the other thing that may be interesting to you is to take a look at the Mamdani campaign in New York, which used algorithms from TikTok very effectively to reach his base. So, on the one hand, you have this desire to control, which has been somewhat lessened since Biden's been out of office, but the ability to use this technology can be very, very powerful. And by the way, oddly enough, one of the reasons that Trump won in 2016 was better use of technology, even though Hillary had much more money. But anyway, I just thought those would be points. Again, two things. One, there is this ability to control things, which we saw during the pandemic and also in the 2020 election. And then the second thing is that this technology can be used in a sophisticated manner, as we just saw in New York City.
So I'm going to add a question to that to you, Matthias, before we go to the audience again, and Pascal. And the question is, how do you think about this intersection of technology, politics, and trust? And so I'll allude to one factoid. Some sources have said that from Elon Musk alone, false statements or misleading statements about past US elections have been viewed by some 2 billion people. Even if that's off by a billion, it's impactful. So that's a follow-on to what Joel said and where Pavel started us.
Yeah, so one thing that comes to mind here in the connection to trust is really the personalized technology and politicians using personalized technology with these algorithms, which has great advantages also, but it does lead to a decline of a shared public sphere. So if you think about kind of old-fashioned campaigning, where we had posters out there that people saw, everybody saw them. Politicians would be in the streets and everybody could see them. We had panel discussions, and if you wanted to know something from a politician, you had to go there, or it was other things that for everyone to see. If you look at the situation. I'm a German citizen and American citizen. I follow news in both countries every day. In the German situation, there's public media. Not everybody gets their news this way, but they exist and they are very prominent. They're very important. In the United States, there's no such thing. So in the United States, people live increasingly in, kind of in their own. If you watch CNN for a week and then you don't watch CNN and you just watch Fox News for a week, you believe you live on different planets, right? That's how bad this is. And if you don't watch any of that and you just kind of get your news feeds on TikTok or Facebook, right, then you live on yet some other planet. And, that creates possibilities for reaching people. And Joel is absolutely right, drawing attention to what's happening in New York City. The campaign there is amazing. But generally, I think we do see a massive transformation of the public sphere away from a shared trust situation, and it's much further along in the United States than it is in either France or Germany. And it's a very serious loss for democracy, and it does much to explain Trump and Musk and everything else around them.
Matthias, thank you. Pascal, would you like to comment on where we are so far? Then we'll go back to the audience.
Oui, je crois que le premier qui a organisé la...
I think the first one who organized an online campaign was Barack Obama. He was quite successful. It's the website called My Bio, My Barack Obama. He contacted approximately millions of voters, including those who would vote for him eventually. And the technology is used by Republicans and by Democrats alike. But the internet and the various platforms are also a way to have alternative truth. And I remember what Donald Trump said in August.
Vous savez, on en a fait une chanson extraordinaire qui consistait à dire...
And we created a song, he wrote a song just for this, the inhabitants of Springfield, 8 cat dogs. And he will have been completely a lack of credibility in Europe, and it was met with tremendous success for Trump. And people are convinced that in Springfield we should prevent from your cat dogs to be eaten by Haitian immigrants. So you see that online platforms are fields for alternative truth. And I think that the French president and some European heads of state, they printed a booklet which is called How to Talk to Trump, and you should avoid words diversity, climate change. No, otherwise the king will get angry, daddy will start threatening people, and you lose the contract. So you see that there is a booklet of semantics, of Trumpian semantics, given to ambassadors, to diplomats. So the leader of the free world doesn't get angry, and we're far, far away from this necessary transparency that we observed in Alexis de Tocqueville's writings. And Kenneth Rose said our Californian friend, if you listen to Fox News, CNN, or TikTok, we live in different planets, but it's the same thing in Paris. If you watch CNews or LCI, the 2 French channels, well, you get the impression that we live in 2 different countries. So you have a fragmentation of voters, and it is a hurdle for the good development of a nation, and we are becoming communities pitted against each other. It becomes a threat to democracy.
Again, open, and please raise your hand, and you're invited to come to the microphone. Someone is looking for a microphone, or someone is going home. There we go, going home. I'm going to ask Matthias a question. Matthias, you have somebody. Okay, please.
Yeah, so you talked about how...
And say who you are.
Sorry, I'm Joshua, student from St. Andrews with a contingent. You've talked about how technology has been used in Trump's favor in the elections, and in many ways, in a world of post-truth that seems to empower the populist, how can we repurpose technology to counter populism and not necessarily act as a tool to bolster it?
That's
What
well
kind of
and sharply
populism?
formulated. Joel?
What populism are you talking about? Are you talking about Bernie Sanders and AOC's populism, or are we talking about Trump's populism? I mean, so what do we do? Do we decide that we're going to make it very difficult for these people to, whether they're on the left or right, communicate because maybe they say a lot of things that aren't true? I don't know. I think most politicians say a lot of things that aren't true. I think the key thing is going to be you just have to keep working and hope that your message gets through. But the default seems to be some form of censorship, and as bad as I think what's happening on both right and left, I think censorship is really worse.
So I have a question. Matthias, please.
Yes, I mean, let me add one thought to this, going into a slightly different direction. So, one can think about what to do in the domain of communication, but as we think about what to do in the present day with technology to make democracies more stable, one other topic to really also think about is the delivery of public services, the state delivery. Because people get frustrated and they turn to populism. And Joel is right to point out this is a complex topic, populism. But people get frustrated with the state, with the fact that they live in states, with the fact that they live in governments. What Foucault called gouvernementalité. Right? They're getting frustrated with that if the state doesn't come through with them. And I think what is absolutely important for democracies to find better ways of improving the gouvernementalité, right, the governmentality through better delivery, and technology can be hugely helpful there. Think about the China again, right? China, 10 years ago, everybody thought, China would become democratic. Not everybody, but a lot of people who knew about China 10, 15 years ago thought they would become democratic. But instead, they have upgraded their version of authoritarian governments into the 21st century using technology. Democracies badly need to do the same. And a fascinating case study where something like that is done incredibly well is Taiwan, the other version of being China, so to speak, right? So they have learned how to use technology in public service delivery, also using online deliberation, so integrating citizens into the democratic process, but also making it easier for people to get state services through online delivery. And European countries are terrible at that. And if we just kind of thought about this, how to use technology to make the state a friendlier place, a welcoming place for citizens, that would take a lot away from from everybody who wants to say everything is awful, only we can fix it.
Matthias, thank you. I see a hand, and I see two hands. Yes, sir. You first, then we'll go all the way to the tent over there.
Yep. Thank you. I already had the microphone, so I'll just go ahead. My name is Hugo Sornaiolo. I come from the Miskatonian. Anyway, my question is about technological alignment and, well, the current situation that is happening in both Europe, China, and the US, which is that in one place you have convergence within tech elites and the government. In another, like that was the US. In another, you have increasing regulation that is not really working, which is Europe. And the third, you have state funding of technological development. And then there's a whole problem with AI alignment. Like how can you ensure that new technologies serve the common good, or at least serve a version of the common good tailored to each country? And right now we see that this might be a full-blown cultural dispute between different models and what it means. So my question was about that, because you have elites kind of pushing into a certain direction. That was what's happening with Musk and Trump, at least until their breakup. Then a complete different take is governments and tech elites don't get along as in Europe, or that tech elites and the state are one in the same, as in China?
So thank you. Before I go to the panelists, let's get at least two more in. You, please, and you, sir, in the front row. We take them all. We're getting three together. So we'll go to this colleague over here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You've been mentioning about...
And tell us who you are.
Sorry. My name is Olena Bobak. I'm from Ukraine, currently studying in College of Europe, interested in public-private partnerships and defense innovations, and therefore I would like to touch the issue on trust. And you have been mentioning that it's getting decreased between private and public. What would be your thought if there is any chance that increasing private-public partnerships on defense procurement as a way of military ramp-up and integration of Silicon Valley tech giants into the framework of defense, could it increase the trust or work out to the contrary? Thank you.
So thank you very much. And then we'll take this gentleman, and then the last replies round with our panelists.
Being concerned about oligarchy presumably is about being concerned about what they can do with the power. And Musk's revenues last year, Twitter's revenues were 2.5 billion, and SpaceX was 10 billion. Tesla was 97 billion. AT&T's revenue last year was 122 billion. Verizon's was 134 billion, and T-Mobile's was 66.1 billion. They charge 500% more in America for wireless services than it costs Europeans. 500%. No one talks about it. No one ever discusses it. That's the power of regulatory capture. Musk and these guys are small beer compared to the powerful oligarchs of America who are the incumbents that have captured the regulatory state and are shaking down the American public for the equivalent of, if you cut US cell phone prices to where the UK is, just the UK, it would be the equivalent of a $1 trillion tax cut. So I would put it to you all that the oligarchy that we should be concerned about is the one that's in the White House Oval Office every day, whatever administration is in power, Republican or Democrat, which is the one that gets to charge Americans those prices and never get challenged on it.
Thank you. So you've pleased row 1 and 2 in the center. So we'll hear from Pascal, and then Joel and Matthias will wrap us up. Pascal.
Je vais répondre à la première.
I'll try to answer to the first question. And I think that one of the conflicts between the US and Europe is that the European Commission wanted to regulate the GAFAMs. And this will to regulate the GAFAM was led to a huge anger among the American officials. Remember the discourse of J.D. Vance in München. He said it was France, Europe was the place for the freedom of expression, and he spent years in the US, and I have some family members out there, but I don't think that America is a place for freedom of expression without problems. The cartoons of Charlie Hebdo were never published in the US. Shakespeare and many authors, male and female, are forbidden in libraries, in schools. Where's the freedom of speech? What is this fairy tale sold by J.D. Vance? He just wants to impose his vision of freedom of speech. We know that the US have always have to do with puritanism and the will of freedom of citizens, and I think it's not true. that the rise of feminism and the rights of LGBT communities lead to support to Hamas. It doesn't make no sense. You can hate Hamas and support the LGBT rights and women's rights. So I think that unfortunately wokeism has become out of control during this administration. The fact that Europe wants to censor contents with pedophilic contents and hate speeches is truly legitimate. And I don't know why the vice president of a country which is now is completely obedient to his president, just like we saw in the USSR. And we should actually draw a parallel between North Korea, Putin, and the United States. They have the same reflexes, they have the same ideas, but we have a lot of similarities that may explain why Donald is such a good friend of Vladimir Putin and what the Europeans should have said to J.D. Vance. In Rome, you have to behave like Romans. We are independent. And you are not the leaders of the world yet. There's a long way to go if you want to regulate the GAFAM. We'll do it, whatever you think. And Trump, we know, he's a peacemaker. Even he's an aggressive peacemaker, so they have nothing to fear.
Joel, we go to you now.
Okay, I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to talk really fast. This is what you get for growing up in New York. First of all, I have to say that the obsession with Musk is kind of strange. Many of these policies and most powerful people by far are not Musk. I mean, and he has been the only of the really powerful ones who is aligned with. Some people aligned with Trump temporarily because Biden was such a terrible president. But I think that in 2028, I would expect most of them to align with the Democrats. Democrats will give them what they want, and in many cases, even more so, because they're, what they want to do is establish a sort of a permanent hierarchy where the government works with a certain number of companies, which are mostly companies like Apple and Microsoft and Google. So I think that obsession with Musk is a little bit strange. And look, I think Musk is kind of a nut myself, but I think at least he's doing something positive as far as I'm concerned in terms of space and defense. I want to get really quickly into defense because I've just done a lot of work in that field. The place where the really big breakthroughs are happening is not so much Silicon Valley, but here in Southern California, because we have the largest collection of aerospace engineers. And there are amazing small companies that are innovating at incredible rates. They're doing things like making more efficient engines. For our friend from the Ukraine, one of my favorite companies is founded by a guy who never went to college, who was a drone racer, who is now producing American-made drones for the Ukraine. So there are lots of interesting things happening in the defense side as the domination of the large World War II generation companies begins to fade, and these new companies. So that's actually a very positive thing. And lastly, on the question of capture of the bureaucracy, I think that was right on target, and that the reality is that the oligarchs really have no ideology. They fundamentally just want to expand their empires, and they'll work with anyone who helps them.
Joel, thank you. Matthias?
Thoughts. So first of all, on the private partnership idea, bringing in Silicon Valley, and it sounded like the idea was to bring Silicon Valley into European security architectures, and that's something I'd be very worried about. So one of the many entities against which Trump is making war these days is the International Criminal Court, which, as you know, is based in the Netherlands. And it's gotten so bad that he has pressured Microsoft to disconnect all digital services to them. So basically, the International Criminal Court finds itself without its usual email services. So it's clear that the American government is willing to instrumentalize, to weaponize its tech industry in such ways. So I think right now Europe rightly is trying to find its own way in many ways. And I think in the tech domain, it's very important that this also happen. And I think there is a lot of potential there. You know, Europe is as big a market space. The EU is as big a market space as the United States. The United States is massively militarily superior, but economically they are equivalent. Europe has as much creativity also in the AI space as the United States. It's just one massive difference is the venture capitalism market and the whole business culture, right? So Americans, any good idea gets scaled very fast, and that is really hard in Europe. And so as Europe is kind of moving forward with more independent, defense spending, technology design, the finance market, the venture capitalism, all of that needs to move along. And then I think there is a lot of potential. On the regulation, so the third question I think also made clear, I mean, regulation is hugely important. I'm a huge fan of what the European Union does with regulation, but one also just kind of needs to see what the limits are of what we can do with regulation. The problems that were brought up can be, and in Europe have been effectively tackled with regulation. But keep in mind, for one thing, the point I just made about the financial markets, right? So that needs to be done independently, right? So Europe can bring a lot of ideas to regulation, but it still needs to be able to scale ideas. Otherwise, the good ideas are applied to a tech market where the biggest things are not happening, right? So we need financial creativity, thinking about how to design this differently, in addition to thinking creatively about regulation. And also, just one serious limitation to regulation is, keep in mind, a lot of software developments, this is all open source, right? It's all there. The Chinese are putting it out. The Americans are putting it out. This is much of that is open source. So so regulation does certain things. But my impression is in particular, when I hear these debates in Europe about regulation, it's kind of overestimated what the domains are in which regulation can do things. And one final thought, and I've been trying to look an opportunity to say something, to bring in Tocqueville. So I see one. So Tocqueville, the way Tocqueville saw the United States is very much this bottoms-up country, right? And that has unleashed a lot of energy and creativity in the United States. So Tocqueville was quite right, and he's often cited for describing that side of the United States. One way in which one dimension where one has to worry about Musk, and not disagreeing with anything that Joel said, but it's kind of that part what Doge has accomplished. Mostly, what we know is that it has centralized enormous amounts of data, breaking down a lot of barriers. So data were stored there and there and there, and they were brought together in ways that were recklessly disregarding many security concerns, safety concerns that had been there before. And that, of course, is going into the direction of a very centralized state power, unitary executive power, centralization of data. So that is kind of depriving the United States of the things that Tocqueville thought was good about them. And in a way, I'm kind of hoping, speaking to a European audience, please bear with us. I'm a professor at Harvard University. We're in the middle of a lot of struggling here right now. And, just having a sense of solidarity from Europe, and from a sense that Europeans are paying attention to values that we should all feel committed to, and to which most Americans are committed, that would be a very comforting thought. Thank you.
So, Matthias, thank you. And gentlemen, thank you. I'm going to thank you for the panel, and thank you for the audience. I'm going to leave you with two pieces of food for thought, and then turn it back over to Laura, and we'll go to the next panel. One is, it struck me, one of you, Joel, I think, said that the tech billionaires will stay with him as long as he is useful to them. It gave me pause. He is being the president. And it makes me wonder, when they stop sticking with him, where they're going. They do have some power. And the second piece of food for thought I leave you with is, I'm picking on you, Joel, again, and you don't have a chance to reply. You say, they have no ideology. I would only say, well, maybe they should. So in the case of Romania recently, the American tech oligarchs, on the grounds of free speech, supported the candidate who wanted to align with Russia, leave the EU, and eliminate political parties in the name of free speech. So, what a panel, what an audience. Thank you all very much.